Welcome to Journey of Riches, the interview series with the authors. I'm joined by John Kelly today. He's a transformational coach. We collaborated on the book, A Journey of Riches, Building Self-Confidence. Great to be chatting with you today, John.
Great to chat to you too, John. Always nice to chat.
Yeah, likewise. And congratulations. The book is a #1 international bestseller in 4 countries.
That's great to hear. Thanks very much, and thank you for all your help and support in bringing it to
You're welcome.
where it's got to.
Yeah, and so you're in Ireland today.
I'm in Ireland today. Yeah, I'm in Ireland. I'm in Ireland a lot.
You
Uh,
are.
I love to travel. I love to get around, to go to
Yes.
different places in the world. But I actually live in the house next door to where I was born in Ireland. So I do like my roots as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. They have that sense of groundedness, and I haven't met too many people that actually live next door to the house that they were born in. So that's something.
Yes, and I suppose it says a lot about my love of this place, and as you say, the groundedness and the familiarity, and yet I love to travel as well. I love to get to places, and it seems the older I've gotten, the more I want to travel. So when I was younger, I didn't do the travel as a lot of young people do now. But as I get older, I seem to have been bitten by going to places. So thank goodness that's something that I can look forward to, and it's ahead of me. So.
Yeah, nice. And do you normally go with your partner? You were saying before that you have a daughter and a grandchildren in Australia and a
I do,
son-in-law.
yes, yes. My
Yeah.
my partner always goes with me. My wife will go with me,
Yep.
particularly when it's visiting the granddaughter and our
Nice.
daughter. I
Yeah.
have to keep remembering that it's our daughter that's in Australia as well as our granddaughter.
Yes.
But
And you
and
like
a son-in-law.
and a son-in-law, yes, part of
Yeah,
the family. Nice.
yes.
And you also like to travel for like for a purpose. So we were chatting before about going to certain spiritual places that align with the chakra centers, energy centers in the body.
Yes, I'm initially I was brought up in a very religious home, and when I went abroad anywhere, I loved to go to churches and cathedrals and monasteries, and I still love to do that. I always imagine the hundreds and maybe thousands of years of prayers that are stuck in the walls and embedded in the walls, and the energy of that. But increasingly, as my spirituality has expanded, and less driven by dogma and more driven by, I would call, my inner knowing, my inner soul, then places that have been energy centers for indigenous people for thousands of years, those places that attract me. And my next plan is to get to Glastonbury in the UK and England, to visit the heart chakra center of the world as it currently is, and then see where else I can get to. Certainly Uluru on my next visit to Australia will be one of those places as well. So those places attract me, uh, purely to feel the energy expansion. I mean, as a young person growing up, none of this made sense to me. I didn't understand it, didn't study it, and now as I settled more into who I really am, and I see the transformation in nature that occurred in me, and it has occurred in others that I've spoken with, whenever they get a fuller understanding of our connection to something bigger than ourselves. And that's, somebody asked me recently, actually in a business context, they'd seen stuff that I'd written online, and they said, if you have one message for me, what's the message you want me to take away from anything that you're writing? And I said, well, if I had one message for you, it's to see through the illusion of our separation from something bigger than ourselves, the illusion of the separation from the divine. We're not separate, we're one. And it was a business conference, and they did look at me, and I said, you asked me what to take away. I'm telling you, that's what I would take away. So
Nice. And I find that more and more of these spiritual principles, you can find them in business practices and organizations that have it through their values and mission statement.
that's very true. And they come at it from a from a different perspective maybe than I would come at it. But
Mm.
the truth of it all is, as I see it, is that the closer you get to being your authentic self, the self that you know is connected to the divine, as opposed to the self that you think you need to be, which we can call our ego. The closer you
Mm.
get to knowing and seeing and feeling that authentic self, the easier decisions are to be made in business. And you're actually not making decisions. You're doing what you know to do. So you don't need to make decisions. You just do what you know to do. And that comes from a clarity of mind that comes about because you understand who you really are and what you really are. And therefore businesses that allow their executives to develop that clarity of mind will perform better. They also perform better because that clarity of mind allows them to see their people, to hear their people, to listen to their people. And that in and of itself has a strong benefit to business.
Yeah, 100%. Because if people feel valued, I mean, if the people feel seen and heard, then that they know that they're valued and appreciated and that they matter. And it's not just all about the bottom line, that actually there are human beings here in the organization and that they have a voice, and that voice matters, and it's appreciated.
That's so true. And the irony of it is for a lot of people is that adds to the bottom line. And yet
Mm,
a lot of business executives think, no, we need to keep focusing on the bottom line. And sometimes you have to be tough with people in order to drive the bottom line. You can be tough with people, but you can be compassionate and tough in a business sense. Tough being, let's make the decisions that are right for us and for our people. And once you treat people the way that they need to be treated, once they feel heard, as you've said, once they feel seen, they will perform better. It's proven, and thankfully there's more and more research coming from the business schools to show that corporations that have a stakeholder value focus more than a shareholder value focus will deliver greater shareholder value. So that research is coming up time and time again. And when I say stakeholders, I mean the people who work in the business as well as the customers who buy from the business.
that's a very good point. That it's yeah, a lot of businesses have been doing it back to front.
They think that if they focus on the bottom line, they will increase the bottom line. And I'm not saying you don't keep an eye on the bottom line, but I am
Or
saying you drive your bottom line by keeping an eye on how you're interacting with your people and your customers.
that is so true, so true. Yeah,
And it
very
links
valid point. Yeah.
it links everything, John, with what we've talked about, particularly in the book, the whole aspect of self-confidence and growing within yourself. Uh, there's some of the chapters in the book, and I was reading about self-confidence. Do you measure your self-confidence on external metrics or internal metrics?
Mm.
And the external metrics are metrics that somebody can take away from you. In other words, you measure your self-confidence by how often people say, oh, you did a great job, well done there, I love what you're doing, I love how you're looking. uh, those are external metrics,
Yeah.
whereas the internal metrics that comes from knowing who and what you are, somebody much greater than who you think you are, that's where true self-confidence comes. And any leader in a business who can get their people to see that that's where true self-confidence comes from. It comes from their innate worth because they are human, not because of what they do. It's their human beingness that creates the innate worth, not their human doingness. And that any leader who can get that engendered within their people will have a high performing team. It's great to have all of the other, let's call it, ways of doing within business, good structures, good processes, good understanding of where you're trying to go to, vision and strategy. That's all great. But the magic comes in awakening your people to their own inner brilliance and inner genius, and letting them have that self-confidence that emanates from knowing who and what they are.
Mm. that's a big distinction to get to that point, to realize that, yeah, it doesn't really matter. The external doesn't matter so much because we live in a world where really the world, a certain aspect of our world does actually value the external so much, and the metrics of that, and being able to actually, prove the worth so much. But again, that's back to front, isn't it? That
It's
it's a
it's back to
back
front,
to
yeah.
it's
And
back to front. Yeah.
it is. It's outside in when it should be inside out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
100%.
yet that's the paradigm within which most businesses and which most people in the world currently operate. But what I'm
Yes.
seeing in my world is that increasingly that paradigm is being shifted, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see. And it's a paradigm that's been shifted in many aspects of it, because when humans are involved, the one thing that they have in common is their humanness. They
Mm.
they look for many differences. They look for separation. They look for what makes humans segment into different markets. And there's so many different. I mean, marketing is full of segmentation and who you're targeting. Uh, Psychometric profiling is full of what type of individual you are. So it segments people. But humans can't be segmented because ultimately it's all one. And no matter how much you try to segment it, you're going against the nature of who and what we are. So yes, it has proven useful for some people to be able to segment this or segment that. But when it's going against our true nature, ultimately our true nature will win out. Now, for some, that might take a few thousand years, but
Yeah, yeah.
in the
Yes.
in the grand
Or
scheme
a
of things, a few
multitude of
thousand years is
lifetimes.
nothing. Yeah, or a multitude of
Yeah.
lifetimes, absolutely.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
thankfully, in my experience,
Yeah.
I see that shifting, and I see it shifting for the better in many organizations that I work with. There are some organizations where they're kind of don't go there. Uh, but
Well,
there's
change is can be a sticky thing, especially with a large organization. And
it
yeah,
can be, yes.
yeah.
But there's a draw in humans. There's in Ireland we use the word agra, which is a kind of an internal expression of there's something that we love about this that keeps drawing us to see more, to expand our energy. That
Um,
that's the nature of being human. So there's a natural draw towards the transformative paradigm that I speak about. Uh, and some people resist that, not just in the resistance of change, but they resist that because it steps out of the familiar into a place that can be frightening for some whenever you step out of something that's so familiar, and discomforting for some. But it's wonderful whenever people see it. I've had conversations with people who they'll come back to me and they'll say, I don't know what you did. I don't know what you said, but my panic attacks have gone. Uh, and the people who work with me, they're nicer people now. You know, something shifts.
we change the world
And
around us by changing ourselves.
yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And all I point to is the truth of what you've just said.
Yeah.
And that uncovers self-confidence. I was going to say build self-confidence, but building self-confidence is not the word, or not the word. It's uncovering the
Yeah,
confidence
true, true.
that's in there.
Uncovering it. Because already there, it's our natural essence of who we are, it's our authentic nature. True. Yeah, it's uncovering confidence.
Yes. And
What's
and yet
been your journey of uncovering self-confidence?
I suppose my journey of uncovering self-confidence is it might be typical of a lot of people's journeys, in that I growing up I was reasonably confident, I would say. I had a lovely, stable upbringing, a great family, a nice, straightforward trajectory, if you like, in life, in that you went to school, you succeeded academically, you went to college, you succeeded there academically, you then got a job, you succeeded in the job, you then got a partner, you built a family, all of the classic certainly Western society view that, yeah, that person is successful and you put a few pound in the bank. Although in my cases, I always spent a few more pound than I didn't have in the bank. But that was fine. That was part and parcel of life. And then I set out on my own and left my role as a sales and marketing director, as somebody senior and important in a corporate organization, to do my own thing, because there was something calling me about sitting in the corporate world just wasn't doing it for me, and doing the same thing over and over again and waiting for a load of money from shareholding and things like that wasn't doing it
Mm-hmm.
for me. So I stepped
Mm-hmm.
out on my own,
Mm-hmm.
and that was interesting, and it led to a situation whereby after a couple of years I realized a lot of the confidence that I had was tied up in what I did and who people thought I was, as opposed to who I actually was. And that led to a shattering of the confidence that I had. So the confidence that I had built up was a confidence based on external metrics as viewed by the paradigm of what is success in Western business society. And that paradigm was shaken. And I didn't know why it was shaking it, but I knew I wasn't in good shape. I knew I was starting to get anxious, and then ended up with full-blown anxiety and panic, and what was later diagnosed as general anxiety disorder and general health anxiety disorder manifested itself in the form of heart attack symptoms. And no matter how many heart tests I got that said there's nothing wrong with you, go away, my head still couldn't get over that. And I suppose living with that for a few years brought depression, even though depression was not something that I thought I had. But I can see looking back that that's what I had. I can see looking back that there were times when killing myself seemed to be the best option. And I could see all that. But thankfully, I had enough around me to draw me away from that, enough family around me to draw me away from that. And even though my family, they knew I had panic attacks, but they weren't worried about it. They sort of hoped that I would work through it. But internally within myself, I was shattered. I was I was gone. I didn't know I was functioning. I was earning money because that was a necessity. But certainly happiness was the furthest thing from my mind. And I suppose I did do some cognitive behavioral therapy, some health service conversations, exploring the nature of thought and trying to reframe thought, trying to become more positive. And it had a bit of an effect. And it wasn't until a friend of mine who was in the same business as I was, training people how to sell more product to major supermarkets, and particularly in the food and drink world. And he said, there's more to life than what we think. And I said, well, I'm the one that's been telling you there's more to life than what you think. I'm the one that's been talking to you about God and a religious God, and that there's a safety net, that there's nowhere to fall because you'll be held in God. But my God was very much a religious God and was outside of me. And through conversations with this guy who was a transformative coach and is a transformative coach, he started to talk to me about the nature of thought, and that it's not a matter of reframing thought. It's a matter of seeing that your experiences and your feelings are just thought. They're real, they're painful, particularly when the thought is suicidal, but it's still just thought. And underneath that thought, there's a brilliance, there's a divine connection. And this was a guy who I now call him a lapsed atheist, because he had no belief in anything divine. And then he started to see it for himself. And when he started to point to it, I realized that all of my studies, particularly my theological studies or my religious studies, were actually pointing to this. And my unsettledness within me was that part of me within me that was saying, not the way you're doing it, John, not the way you're doing it, John. My system was shouting at me, but I didn't know what it was saying. Uh, and, but ultimately I heard it. And ever since, It's just been a blast. It hasn't been straightforward,
Mm.
but it has been life-changing, transformative, hence the title Transformative Coach.
Wow. And how that was like 20 years ago, was it, John? 25 years ago?
Yes, it started, I would say 2005, so it is about 20 years ago. My journey to try and understand the world, I remember, started in 1989 when I read a book by a Spanish mystic called St. John of the Cross. It was the collected works of St. John of the Cross. And at that time I was reading it from, I suppose, a dogmatic religious perspective. And I remember some of the beauty within the book, particularly the poems, but also some of the difficulties in the dark night of the soul type conversations that were in that. And I remember crying bitter tears, thinking, I'll never be like what St. John of the Cross is talking about. And so that was 1989, and it was only whenever I started on this transformative coaching journey from 2005 and really from about 2017 that I actually started to see the truth in what John of the Cross was talking about back in
Yeah.
1989, but I couldn't see it back then.
Wow. So, what are three tips that you would recommend or suggest to people that are wanting to uncover more of their authentic nature and access that self-confidence?
I suppose the first tip is asking yourself, where do you think your experiences come from? Do they really come from outside of you, or do they come from inside of you? Do some self-reflection on how you feel and why you feel the way you feel. The second tip, I would say, find a guide, find somebody that you admire and how they live their lives and seem to have a life of contentment, and ask them to point to you what they have seen. If you find a guide who tells you here's how you do it, then that's not the right guide. The guide who points to what they have seen and what they
Yeah.
believe has caused them to see what they've seen, and then encourages you to go out and see for yourself, then you're on the right track. And I suppose a third tip is take time to appreciate and be grateful for what is in your life as opposed to what isn't. The old saying of take time to smell the roses, it's so true. And there are loads of cliches and wise sayings and aphorisms and various adages about how to live your life. And there's a lot of truth in a lot of those things. So pick up one of those, but taking time to smell the roses, taking time to appreciate the beauty around you, taking time to breathe, and whatever practice helps you get into that, whether it's walking, yoga, meditation, contemplation, golf, swimming, running, anything that gets you into that space of oneness with what is, then I think that would be something to follow.
Get into that space of oneness of what is. It's kind of like a state of just beingness, where you just feel connected to everything and present and without having to judge or label what you are experiencing.
Totally, yeah, without having to
Yeah.
judge or label. And growing up in a world of business, you think judgment is a key competency, and in many job interviews, uh, it is written down as a competency, the ability to analyze and judge.
Mm.
And yet it can turn you into a judgmental individual where you judge the behavior of others, or judge others by their behavior as opposed to just seeing what is their behavior. There's a great saying that's attributed to a man called Sydney Banks, who his work has underpinned a lot of the principles behind transformative coaching that I do. And he's quoted as saying that everyone is doing the best they can with the thinking they have at that moment. And it's a great way of reflecting, well, this person in front of me, even though I don't like what they're doing, they are doing the best they can with the thinking they have at that moment. And seeing through their thinking allows me more of the time to see their divine essence and their divine connection. And not all of the time. I'm far from perfect, and there's many times
Right,
when
right.
when I have to walk out of the room because I'm afraid of what might come out of my mouth. So, I'm not sitting there like some guru who's totally placid in the face of people who are annoying me. But
Right.
I can take enough time to think, what's going on with them that's causing
Mhm.
them to be that way.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, that's a really good question. And it just really gets you outside of that moment and also as more of an observer of what's happening rather than, feeling like, it's just an interaction. There's something more to the perspective or to the experience.
Yes, and it's a great way to look at it, to be an observer. And
Yeah.
if I can be an observer of me as well as an
Mm.
observer of another person, if I can observe the conversation that I am having with somebody else as a disassociated third party, if you like,
Mm.
that allows me to get out of my thinking, because what I think creates my reality. Whenever I know from my experience that my reality is one of divine connection, let's say, and what's false is what I have created.
Right.
It feels real. The feelings are real, and from some of the work and readings that I've done, it triggers actual physical chemicals in your system, and hormones and endorphins, and your physiology is something arising from your thoughts. You can put your physiology in a test tube. You can't put your thoughts in a test tube, but you can put your physiology in a test tube. So the feelings are
Yeah.
real. So whenever I say it's just thought, I mean what's engendering your real feelings is just formless energy, the power of creative thought. The feelings are real. The pain is that you feel inside comes from chemicals, comes from your physiology. That's not something you can get rid of lightly, but you can get rid of it when you understand the nature of thought. Uh, I'm taken by, and I don't read a lot about Buddhism, but I do understand bits of it, and some of the sayings that pain in life is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I think what they're pointing to is we cause our suffering by our thought reaction to the pain, and therefore we cause ourselves to suffer more, as opposed to just feeling into the pain, and which is another example of living in the what is. If you're living with pain, that's an example of living with the what is, and feeling into that can allow that to teach and to dissipate.
And how much of your journey has been about releasing conditioning from your environment, from your parents, and society's expectations of who you should be, as a man?
It's certainly above 99%. I think
Right. Okay.
how much above it, I'm not too sure. I think it has played such a huge part when I look
Yeah.
back on it.
Yeah.
My conditioning, and
Yeah.
the thoughts that create my reality. I ask myself often, how many of those thoughts were actually my thoughts, and how many of them
Mm.
were from my parents, my church, my teachers, my upbringing, my conditioning, uh, and the vast majority of them came from somebody else. Uh, but you do feel, certainly when you take time to reflect, I felt a calling to move away, and to live an experience of life as opposed to living a dogma of life or living a rules-based life. And I'm not a lawbreaker or a rebel by any means, although some people might think I am. But it's just living a life of experience and living a life of reflection and living a life of trying to tap into my innate wisdom. And all of this comes from seeing more and more and more of the illusion of separation.
Mm.
There's a lady I spend some time working with online, and she's developed a number of courses, and she talks about the core wound of humanity being this illusion of separation from their divine connection. And out of that core wound arises so many other issues and so many other behaviors. And which particular issue arises can depend on where you're brought up and what your upbringing is like. But at the core of everything is not knowing you're connected to the divine, or thinking you have to do something to become connected to the divine. And certainly my religious upbringing, I would liken it to behave, 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 and you will find God.
Mm.
And now I
Or
see,
or else. Yeah.
yeah, or else. But now I see God has already found you. God is already in you, and I use God deliberately because that's my religious upbringing.
Yeah.
And once you see that God is within you, then the behavior of love and compassion and unconditional love that flows. So I would say most religions, and certainly my religion that I was brought up in, had it the other way about. And
Mm.
probably for good reasons, probably because it can take a lot to get to see that understanding, and maybe it's easier for just somebody to lay down a whole load of rules. If you behave this way here, you'll be okay. Whereas I now see it, you're okay already. And once you see that, your behavior changes. My
Mm.
behavior changed. And
Mm.
particularly, my panic, my suicidal, my depression, all of that disappeared. It comes back occasionally, but I know what it is when it's coming back. So now I can laugh at it coming back. And again, a lot of what I'm sharing here is my experience and my self-reflection, but I haven't done it by myself. I have been guided, and I have had the right teacher come along at the right time and pointing to various things. And one of my teachers gave me a tip. Whenever I fall back into that anxiety, whenever I feel that depression coming on again, instead of saying, "Oh, there it is again, I shouldn't have that. I should be over this by now. I know better than this." She
Mhm.
says, "No, just say, gosh, there it is again. Isn't that interesting?"
Mm.
And in not being judgmental of me, being kinder to me, less and less and less of that stuff comes back. And so therefore, having the right guide at the right time is also useful.
And do you find, I agree 100%, and do you find that you have, with the freedom you have of your thought, and that you have God within you already, do you find that you have more spontaneity in your life?
I have more spontaneity in my life.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have more spontaneity, and I'm smiling because my spontaneity comes from sometimes I do things and people say, "Why did you do that?" And I used to have to explain, well, I'm doing this, or I'm doing this program because I want to learn this. Now the answer is, why are you doing that? Just because I want to. And it's an excuse my children used to give me when they were young. Why did you do that? Just. And I would say, just is not a reason. And they would say, just is a reason, Daddy. It mightn't be a good reason, but it is a reason. And now all these years later, 20, 30 years later, it's actually the best reason.
That's
So
great.
And that's where
It comes
spontaneity
full
comes from.
circle.
Why did you want to do that? Just, why
Yeah.
do I want to go to Glastonbury
Yeah.
to visit the heart chakra of the world? Just why do I want to go
Yeah.
to
It's giving you inspiration, probably joy. When you go there, you'll feel good and you'll raise your vibration more likely.
I
So,
hope so. I hope so. But I'm not going there for that
yeah.
expectation. And that's
No.
something that I have learned is not to go to places to get
Yes.
something, to be better, to grow. I am already whole and complete and perfectly imperfect as I am.
Yeah.
It it's just out of the fun and the curiosity that comes from, wow, look at that. Wasn't that brilliant? And as I find I go to these places and my energy expands and some of the conversations I have with coaches, I have a great channeling coach who helps me a lot. And the energy expansion I feel from those conversations, that's wonderful. But I don't go into the conversations to expand my energy and to feel wonderful. I go into the conversations out of openness and curiosity without expectation. And I come out feeling expanded and feeling wonderful.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I don't. So, uh, and I might be mildly disappointed for half an hour or so, but I get over that.
Yeah. You're not hugely emotionally invested in an outcome being a certain way.
Exactly, exactly. Because I know right now I have everything I need. And
Mhm.
yeah, I would like a few more quid. Yes, I would like to go to Australia to visit my granddaughter business class as opposed to economy. But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that,
Yeah.
you know, uh, and I might seem a bit laissez-faire about it. I'm not really because I'm still human. No,
Mhm. Right.
I still like my comforts and I still strive. Uh, but at the back of it all, I now have this knowing, thank God, I now have this knowing that I'm all right. I now have this
Yep.
knowing
It's a
that
quiet confidence, the
it's a
confidence in
quiet
your authentic nature.
confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, but it's an innate confidence. It's
Mm.
coming from my confidence is not in me, it's in my connection to oneness. Thank God. Whereas before growing up, I was building my confidence in me and my ability to do things. And
Mm.
that can be taken away from you. As I discovered when I left from being the sales and marketing director of a company that had millions to spend and therefore was important to people,
Mm.
to being the owner of a business that had zero to spend and therefore I became relatively unimportant to people in my
Right.
head, in my head.
Right. Right.
And thankfully that fall, if you like, from being somebody important in the corporate world to being nothing
Right.
was the move that has uncovered who and what I really am, which is uh, somebody connected to the divine universal intelligence of life, called whatever you like, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. It's there. I call it God because that's kind of what I've brought up.
Yeah. And
Source,
so,
whatever.
yeah, I mean, I feel like when you have experiences, it's hard to, how to explain certain synchronicities or events that happen in your life. Like I feel like the more that you go on that journey of self-discovery and wanting to learn who you are and what you're about and what you value and your essence and authentic nature, it's very hard to deny that there is an intelligence woven in everything in this world.
It is hard. It is hard to deny, and the synchronicities that
Yeah.
come about
Yeah.
when you're open. One of the things I suppose of 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 where I'm at, maybe leaving my job the way I left, that was appropriate. That was at the right time, even though it might have caused some financial hardship. But there's
Mm,
another. My opening into this world started, as I said, in 1989, trying to understand the collected works of St. John of the Cross, and
mm,
I couldn't get it. But after I left my employment in the corporate world in 2000 and went into being self-employed in the corporate world, I was doing some pastoral work with my church and was called to go and attend a pastoral workshop to see would it be worth bringing it into our parish. And very early on in the workshop, it seemed, no, this isn't right for our parish. So I took myself away from the workshop into the monastery library, and I discovered the writings of a man called Richard Rohr, who's still writing, and he's a Franciscan. And I started just browsing in the library and started to read a few of his bits and pieces. And he was a bridge from my dogmatic Catholicism
Mm.
into this spiritual oneness, and he introduced me into the concept of non-duality, which I hadn't the first notion about, and particularly coming from the corporate world, coming from a dogmatic religious world, I lived a dual life in that there was good and there was evil. There was disconnect, there was God out here and there was me here. My world was separate and divisive. And through that synchronous opportunity to attend the library when I should have been sitting in a course that I didn't want to attend, and getting to meet this man, that opened up a whole new world. And his connections and his writings, particularly from Buddhist friends and friends from other religions, that opened up a whole new world. And I transitioned via a very Christian route into what many people now would see as some spiritual woo-woo. And the reason why it's easy to transition is the whole thing is all one.
Right.
You just might be looking at it down a slight segment of the overall wonders of it when you look at it from
Mm.
my upbringing, but the whole thing is all one. So that was an opportunity that just opened up out of
Mm.
how did that happen? So that's just one example, and there's been countless examples of that, countless examples.
And so what do you hope readers glean from your chapter?
I suppose that the main thing I hope they glean from it is that they are much better than they think they are.
Mm.
They are greater and have access to greater wisdom inside of them than they think they are. No matter how wise they actually currently think they are wiser than that. And that once they drop out of their thought created reality, their thought created ego, and into who they really are, into their essence, there's a whole new world, whole new universe, whole new cosmos of exploration for them that just is brilliant. So, and whatever aspect of their life is troubling them, they will find the answer when they drop out of the thought created reality that they have, or when they see for themselves that they have created their own reality through thought, and that thought created reality also created the illusion of separation from the divine. So I hope that they see that. I hope that their consciousness, their level of awareness is raised enough for them to see that for themselves. And even if they don't see it, to maybe even just create a spark of curiosity that they'll go looking.
A spark
Because,
of curiosity. I love it.
yeah,
And
seek and you shall find.
absolutely, absolutely. Start with the treasure within. I would
Yes.
appreciate chatting with you today, John Kelly. And where can people find you? We can put your website in the link below. And
Yeah, I've started to promote a John Kelly Connects
yeah,
website and
yeah,
both on LinkedIn and social media as well.
yeah,
So uh,
yeah.
they'll find that.
Okay, great. We'll put it in below. And yeah, thanks again. It's great chatting with you. And I know from reading your chapter firsthand, it's the contrast is, yeah, quite amazing and humbling as well. That that you're a man of such wisdom today, and that wasn't always the case. That you went through the dark night of the soul, and you discovered that essence within you that was there all along, but it had layers and layers of conditioning suppressing it. And so
Yes.
I'm thankful that you stuck around and dug deep, and I know that there's thousands of other people are as well. So I really appreciate the time spending with you today, John.
Likewise, John, and I'm thankful that I've met you and that you sought me out. So that was synchronous as well.
It was synchronicity.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, John. And if you'd like more of the interviews with the authors, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll send you more your way. Peace out.
Ciao.